Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar on using quizzes in Fusion. So today we're going to look into using quizzes in some detail, looking at all aspects of using quizzes in Fusion, how to give them to your students, how to manage the marking and grading of a quiz, and how to set quizzes for your students. So I'm going to start by showing you an example of a quiz. If I go to my learning spaces, I have a learning space specifically designed to share quizzes between colleagues. So this is a learning space that all the teachers in the school are managers of, and you can put quizzes in here and anyone can copy one of these quizzes and take it away to use with their students. So quizzes in Fusion, when they're created, are files that behave like any other file on the system and can be moved around and used anywhere. I'm going to show you an example of a quiz in here. So this is a quiz about cell structures, and you can see that it has a timer, and at the top here we have the title, and we also have the introduction to the quiz. Now this introduction can be anything at all. It could be your instructions to students to tell them how many questions you want them to complete or something like that. But in this example, what we've done is add learning materials into the top of the quiz. So when you add learning materials like a video or some text for a reading comprehension, that then turns the quiz in itself into a learning object. So the whole of the learning and the assessment can take place in a single quiz. Moving on down, we've got all my various question types. So the first question type here is long text question. So a text question by its very nature cannot be self-marked by Fusion because of the complexity of text. So if you do choose to include a text question in your quiz, you will have to mark that question yourself, either manually by going in and doing it yourself, or you can allow students to go in and self-mark their text questions. And you can see in this example we've also set a word count for this question. Scrolling down, the next question is a single choice. So there's only one correct answer here. We've got the question, and then we've got supplementary information. So this happens to be a diagram of a cell. It could be anything at all in here, but every single question has the ability to add supplementary information like this. And with a single choice question, you can only tick one option. Then I've got a section break here. So a section break consists of a title and a piece of content. And you can choose to include only the content or both the title and the content. Moving on down. This question is a multiple choice where there are more than one correct answer. So if I was to start ticking, eventually it stops allowing me to fill it in. With a multiple choice question, you restrict the number of answers students can give, and that stops them just ticking every option and getting it right by default. We've then got a short text question. Now, short text questions are self-marking. The answer could be a word or a number, but it's anything that's small enough and accurate enough for students to be able to get it right if they know the answer. And the student's answer simply has to match exactly the answer provided by the teacher in the quiz. And finally, we have our matching type question. And with this one, it's like a single choice drop-down type question, where you have multiple choices for the answer. But those multiple choices are provided for every single option. So it's a quick way of doing more than one single choice question, all within one question heading. Okay, so let's have a go at creating a quiz like this. And you'll see how each of these question types are constructed. To close a quiz, you simply click on the bar at the top. Right, so I'm going to create a new quiz. I can do that by clicking on the plus at the left hand side here, or I can go into any file area and click Add, a new file. And then you choose Form or Quiz. Now you see at the top here there's an option to import QTI. So it is possible to import simple QTI format quizzes. And there are a few quiz types where you can save a quiz as QTI, and that makes it compatible with other systems, and then you can use this to import it. But mostly you don't need to worry about this. So when you create a form, you have a file name for a short file title, and then you have the title of the form, and that allows you to write a long title across the top of the form. Okay, and now I've got the introduction to my quiz. Now, if you remember at the top, I can put any sort of content or instructions. So I'll do that now. Okay, so I've put some text and a video into the introduction of this quiz. Then I go on to the quiz settings. Some of these settings are really only appropriate if you're writing a form, but in this instance, even though we're doing a quiz, I will explain what they do so you know. So the very first one here is how many times can somebody submit this quiz? So if you're using a quiz as an exam, you would only normally allow them to submit once, but you can choose any number or unlimited. When you're doing a form, you might sometimes want to limit how many people can actually fill in the form. And an example of this is getting students to sign up for something, and perhaps you only have 15 places available. So you would limit the form sign up to 15 people. And then once 15 people had filled in the form, nobody else would be able to do it. You can make a form anonymous. And again, you wouldn't tend to use this with quizzes. But for example, if you were asking students to vote in an election or use a suggestions form, then using anonymous submissions is an option. You can allow students to view their results once they've submitted them. And the next button is the important one here. This is the one that makes this into a self-marking quiz. And then this next one, it allows students who are viewing the results of their quiz to add the marks to text questions. As I mentioned before, text questions have to be marked manually, and you can do it yourself, or you can allow your students to do that. So I'll just tick for that. Then you can choose some time, so I can make that 1 hour long. And you've got some colours here to change the colour of your questions and the content block. In fact, while I'm here, I'll just choose an orange for my content block so you can see it being applied later. So all I've really done here is tick this to be a quiz, allow students to view the results, and allow students to self-mark. And say continue. Okay, so I'm now inside the build the form section, which is this build button here. This is the name of my form, and it's asking me to add my first question. So let's do that. Now I'm just going to copy the previous quiz that we saw using the same questions and question types. So the first question here is going to be our text input question. This is where you're asking students to put in a long text answer. And I'll just put in the title or the question. And then I scroll down. For every question I put in of any type, I have the option to add supporting information. And that might be pictures, hyperlinks to somewhere else, a video, I've got some symbols, I can attach another file, or I can upload an image while I'm creating this. If you're doing maths questions, it's useful to know that the maths symbol tool is here. I can add a maths symbol. I've got maths and chemistry symbols, in fact. If I choose the maths symbols, I get some templates here that I can use, or I can do it freehand. So I can put in a fraction or a formula. The system interprets what I've just said. I say OK, and then I can add the rest of the equation. And when I'm happy, I just say continue, and that drops it into the supporting information box. But it's not appropriate here, so I'll just delete that. So all I've done is ask my text question. I go down to the bottom. I decide if it's a short single word or phrase or if it's a long text answer. I can decide, like all questions, if it's mandatory, if they have to complete this question before they can submit. I then provide the score for this question. So if a student is self-marking later on, they won't be able to give themselves any more than the full score. And then I've got the option of a minimum or maximum word count. And if you leave that blank, it's simply not applied. So that's it. Text questions are very simple. I just say create question. And that's it, in the list now, ready to add the next question. So the next question is a single choice question. So I'm going to add question, single choice, put in the question. And this one's referring to a diagram of a plant cell. So I'm going to add the diagram into the supporting information. Moving on down. So I'm automatically given 3 options here at the bottom, and it just happens that there are 3 options with this particular question. So I'll put those options into these boxes. And then for the correct answer, I identify that by adding the points to the correct answer there. If I want to, I can provide feedback for the students depending on what answer they gave. With single choice questions, and as with all question types, it's always important to look into other options when you're done and check the options that you have. Some of them are really important. For this one, you simply get to choose between radio buttons and a drop-down menu, but I prefer to use radio buttons. And I create the question. So let's look at our quiz so far. So that's the introduction section. The first question, which was long text, and the second question, which is single choice. And click on the bar to close. Okay, so let's add our third question. Now for this one, I'm going to add a section break. So I choose Add Question, and I'm going to insert a content block. So as I mentioned before, this allows you to put in a section break or to drop a piece of content into the middle of a quiz. I give the new section a title, and I add the content to the content section. And now I get to choose, do I want to only show the content, not show the title? Or do I want to show the title? And if you do, you can make it normal or large size. There's actually almost no difference between them, so normal is fine. If you want to just show the title, you would use this setting and you would just leave the content blank and say create question. Okay, so I've put my content block in. Let's view that. Question, question, and then the start of section 2. And if you remember, I chose that bright orange colour for my section breaks, and that's where this shows up. Click here to close and move to our fourth question type. Now this one is multiple choice, and multiple choice here is where there is more than one correct answer. So I put in my question. For this one, there's no supplementary information, but I do have 5 options at the bottom, and there's only 3 provided. So what I do is I click on any of these little green pluses and add the extra options. And then I fill in the options here. I identify which ones are correct by adding points. And again, I can choose to put in feedback if I want. If I scroll down to the options at the bottom, this is really important for this one. This is where you get to choose how many correct answers there are. I don't want my students to come in and just tick all 5. I need to be able to limit them to the number of correct answers that there are. And when I've done that, create the question. The next question is simple text. So I add my new question, choose simple text, and if you remember, this is the one that is self-marking. So I put in my question. I'm not going to use any supporting information for this one. And all I do is I put in the expected answer. What do I want my students to match? And for this particular question, the answer is actually just 1. And I'm going to give that 1 point if they match it correctly. Now in the other options section here, again quite important, if I want my students, for example, to give their answer to a question which happens to be a money answer, I can, for example, put a £sign in here as a prefix to the answer. So the students will be able to see that when they fill in this box, what they're actually filling in is some currency. Or another example, perhaps the answer here, I'm looking for the answer in meters. So I can add the suffix m just to show the students that the answer should be meters. But I'm not going to use these for this one, I'm just going to create the question. Okay, let's have a look and see how we're getting on. Introduction, text question, single choice, content block, multiple choice, and simple text. Okay, so let's do the last one, which is the matching question type. So I'll add a matching question. So I want to match the cell structures with their functions. Now this is probably the question type that's the most difficult to get to grips with. So what I want to do is match a particular cell structure, in this case a vacuole, with the function that it has in a cell. Now there's actually 5 choices, so I'm going to add the extra 2 options, and I'm going to put in those various functions in here. And what I'm now going to do is create exactly the same question, but for a different cell structure. To do that, I click on this plus here, and that's going to copy the whole lot into a new option. And this time I'm going to put in a different cell structure. And do the same again. And one more. Okay, that's done. So now what I want to do is assign the correct answers. And that's it. I've essentially included 5 different questions within one question here. When I've done that, click to create the question. And that's it. I've finished my quiz. I've put all my questions in. So let's have a final look. And you'll see it's exactly like the one I showed you earlier. We've got my 1-hour timer running, introduction, long text question, single choice, content block or section break, whatever you want to call it, multiple choice, simple text, and a matching question. Now the more observant of you will have noticed that there was actually another option in there. If I click to add question, we have another one which says from bank. The latest version of Fusion's quiz tool has a question bank built into it. It's a simple question bank. So if I click to add a question from the question bank, it first asks me where I want to go. Do I want to go to my question bank or the school one? But I'm just going to stay with my question bank and search. And it takes me to my personal question bank. And here's all the questions that are available from it. I can take any one of these questions and preview. And you'll see these are quite familiar questions. And I can just choose to add that question into my quiz. Now obviously I don't want to include this particular question in my quiz. So I go to the menu and delete the question. I could also, of course, edit the question. I can insert another question after it. I can clone this question. If this is a question structure that I quite like and I just want to slightly alter it, that saves a lot of time. And I can copy any of my questions to the question bank. But I'm just going to delete this one. There, so that's my quiz done. If you want to go and browse the bank at any time, click on the bank. Here's all the questions in my question bank. I can go to any of them, edit them, move them to the other bank, preview the question or delete it from the bank. And also I can add a question directly into the question bank rather than adding it to a quiz. So let's go back to my learning space that has all my forms and quizzes. And here's my new quiz that we've just created. So the next thing I need to do is to make this quiz available to my students. Now there's 3 ways to do that. The first way is to simply add this quiz to a class and invite my students to enter the class and complete the quiz. This is rather a passive way to do it, so you're just leaving it in the class for the students to come and find. To do that, I can either copy this quiz and make a copy to put into the class, or I can move the quiz. So in this particular case, I'm just going to move it. I'm going to tick there, move the file, browse for the class, and the easiest way to do that is in this menu. And I'm going to go to my Science Dashboard class. And because this is a dashboard, I'm going to use the menu to go to the files. And I want to add my quiz here. And you can see when you're moving files, when you get to the destination, you just tick on this button here, Move Files Here, and say yes. And there's my file moved into this class. So it no longer exists in the forms demo where I had it before. The second option is to attach this quiz to my homework. So I would go to Homework, create some new homework for my science group called Cell Structure Quiz. Give the students their instructions. Check the subject and the dates and say Finish. And then I attach my quiz. So I want to add the quiz from the VLE, and at the moment it's sitting in that science class, so it's not in my files. So I go to the Resource Centre, go to Classes, Science Class, and there's my quiz. And it's attached to this homework. And here's a list of all the students that have been set this quiz, and that's it. It's done. So let's go in as a student and see how it looks for a student. So the student goes to their homework. There's my cell structure quiz. There it is. Complete the attached quiz. There's the attached quiz. And the student can run through, they'll watch the video at the start. They can then run down through all the questions and make his selections from the answers themselves. You can watch the second video. I can see that I actually failed to remove that other question, but that's fine. It's Wednesday today. Now you can see that he got wrong answers for these two. This question was just plain wrong, but this question here was the text answer that William provided. And because we ticked to allow William to mark his own work, he can now mark his work out of 2. He can't go any higher than 2 because you can see the teacher's score is here. At the moment it's 0 out of 2, but William can mark his own work. Let's give him a 1. It's a very short answer. And update. And he can now go and view his answers, and you can see he got 75% in total. Okay. Back in as the teacher, I can see that William has been into the homework, so I can see he has seen his quiz. I can click on the quiz, go to the results, and I can see that William has submitted his results. Now I'll come back to grading quizzes shortly. So if you remember, there was a third way to give students a quiz, and that was to give them as a task list. So if I go into tasks and I look at this task list, which is experimental methodology, if I go in and edit the tasks in my task list as a teacher, you can see I've got the ability here to control progress through the task list. So when I put a quiz into a task list, if I just edit this task, once I add a quiz, this option pops up, which is progress. What percentage does the student need to get in their quiz in order to proceed with the rest of the task list? If I left this at 0, it wouldn't affect the student's progress through the task list at all. But if I put an amount in here, if the student doesn't pass this quiz, they don't proceed. So let me look at my results. So I can see that Jenny Brown here hasn't yet attempted this task list. So I'm going to go and log in as Jenny and see how this affects her. Okay, so I'm now logged in as Jenny Brown, and this is my task list that needs doing. And I'm going to start working my way through. And you can see here that this quiz has not been completed to 50%. So at the moment I can see the first few items, and I can go into those and I can view them, and I can work my way through the task list until I get to the point where I'm on the quiz. And then I can complete the quiz and finish the rest of the tasks. Okay, so I'm back in my cell structure quiz homework, and here's the cell structure quiz. And I'm just going to click into it, and I'm going to click on the results button at the top right. So you can see I have 2 student submissions here. I can go and view the results of any individual student at any time. And I can see that Georgia got 92% here, and I can see which questions she didn't do so well in. I can also click the export button here, and that shows me all the results in a table. So I'm able to directly compare all the students to see their results. What the system does is it by default only shows me the latest submission that was submitted for each person, but I can choose to include all the submissions in this list. And then what I can do is download these submissions as an Excel spreadsheet. So I can save them, if you like, for the long term. So I can keep all the results on a spreadsheet, nice and safe. The other thing I can do with my results is grade them. So what I do is I select a grading template, and then I select my students that I want to grade, and I say grade selected. And it applies a grade to all my students, and then I can export those grades to the Markbook. It knows the class that this homework was set for. I just need to choose the subject and export. And that quiz has now gone into the Markbook. Let me go to the Markbook. It's the science group, subject science, and here's my cell structures quiz and the grades that have been achieved. I can go back to the quiz at any time and continue grading students and those grades will appear in this markbook. So that's how to grade a quiz. So let's think about how you would use quizzes. Now, generally speaking, quizzes are designed to be set for groups of students. And we think of groups of students as around 30 students. If you set a quiz for very large groups of students, it's much harder to extract that information by group. So it's always good to set a quiz just for a group. If you've got more than one group, there's lots of ways to do that. Generally, what I would recommend is that for each different group of students who do a quiz, they should have their own fresh copy of the quiz. As I mentioned before, each quiz file, so if I go to my science class and go to the files, each of these quiz files has their own database, if you like, of results or answers, and only the teacher who created the file has access to those answers. Now, if you're a teacher and you have 4 classes and you're wanting to set this quiz for all 4 classes, what I would tend to do is make 4 copies of this quiz and set those for the students. That way you can more easily keep track of the class results and you can export the grades easily to the markbook from that class. If another teacher wants this quiz for their class, you would place this quiz in a shared group like a learning space, and the other teacher would go in, add it to their clipboard, go to their own class or their own My Files area and add it in there from the clipboard. And then they're free to use that quiz with any of their own groups, and they will have their own results in their own file. Using this sort of file structure makes quizzes very easy and simple. We've always started from the principle of quizzes should be easy. There are lots of other quiz tools that are very complex, plenty of options, but if there are too many options, it becomes confusing for some teachers. So we prefer to have a nice simple quiz tool that all teachers can easily use and access. At the very simplest, any teacher can go into a class and add a quiz file. Add the questions, and there it is in the class for the students to use. So even those teachers who are not so confident can still create a quiz and allow their students to complete it. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I hope you've found it useful, and it will help you to now go ahead and use quizzes with some confidence.